This has certainly been a challenging time for our community. Throughout the coronavirus pandemic, we have adapted and pivoted the way we behave as a community, the way we communicate with each other. But there are still important decisions being made by our city government as we respond to the crisis and also in other areas. So we wanted to provide a forum for elected officials to connect with their constituents and for you to hear from them. Welcome to Ward Updates, a series of one-on-one interviews with Ottawa City Councillors. During these discussions, we will talk about the issues that arise from the pandemic, the issues that directly affect you, your families, and your neighbors. We will also share some stories of people who have really risen to the occasion, the heroes in our community during this time. And we'll talk about some other important city business as well. My guest today is the City Councillor for Ward 13, Rideau-Rockcliffe, Rawlson King. Welcome to you.
It's a pleasure to join you.
And we are all adapting, and part of what's happening in our world is we're having these kinds of conversations instead of in-person discussions. So tell me a little bit about the space you're sharing with us today. We're getting a glimpse into your world, and I see a lot of vinyl behind you. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, today I'm joining you from my office, so this is actually the games room. We have I share a very small townhome with my wife, and she's busy working on her professional items and things in the other bedroom that we have, and so not that I'm exiled, but I find that I do a tremendous amount of work here, and now that unfortunately City Hall generally is closed, my staff and I have been working from home, but working very diligently on many issues, especially concerning COVID-19. So typically this is a fun room, but what I found over the last 5 months is that I've been doing a tremendous amount of work, more work than spinning vinyl, the vinyl behind me.
Right. But if we were to reach back there, Rawlson, what kind of music would we find? What's your taste?
There's absolutely fun things. I have a very eclectic taste. So a lot of people might look at me and just think, it's the hip hop, it would be the rap, it would be the things from the 90s. But, I also have the Beatles, have the White Album in mono, the way that God intended people to listen to that album, and the Rolling Stones, and a wide array of music, electronica music. A lot of pop music, and a lot of jazz and even classical. So I have a very eclectic mix of music behind me.
Impressive. Right on. All right, on to more serious topics, and we are going to dig deeply into the coronavirus crisis and the city's response to that, how it's impacting your ward. But I wanted to start by talking about the debate that's happening in North America right now around racism, around policing, defunding the police, systemic issues in our society. You were the first Black man elected to Ottawa City Council, the first Black person elected to Ottawa City Council. So please share your perspective with us on what's been happening and where this conversation needs to go, where it has to turn into action.
Well, what we're seeing is, I think, the reemergence and maybe the reemergence of civil rights for a new generation. And so we see younger people, millennials, really stating that what they're expecting is fair and equitable treatment for everybody in society. And so this was a trend that did not just emerge with the social unrest in the United States. Actually, in Ottawa, we've had challenges around hate crimes, and we've had challenges around issues of police brutality. We've had issues around equity and equal access to public services. So even before the social unrest in the United States, there was a call by community members for the establishment of an anti-racism secretariat, effectively an anti-racism unit at the City of Ottawa, that would really redress issues of systemic racism, ensure that we're really seeking equity of opportunity and equity of outcome for all people within our city, whether they're Black or from other racialized communities, Indigenous or from other religious groups. So we were doing that work before the outset of basically collective outrage and frustration of people in the United States. And the key thing, I think, and the key benefit in Canada and in our existing political institutions is I think that we have the space to have meaningful dialogues that will lead to policy prescriptions, that will lead to meaningful change around areas such as employment equity and economic development and investments in social services. So we've been working hard on that even before the social unrest, and we will continue to work hard to ensure that we really push for greater equity for all people in the city.
And how does that translate into action? Because I think there is a fear on the part of some people that when these moments occur, there is a response. There are statements made by a wide range of people. We can't let this happen again. We need to change. We need to be mindful. The environment has to change. The system has to change. But how do you actually create that change?
First, we undertake public consultation. Public consultation with a view for really identifying the gaps in communities, and then ensuring that once those gaps have been identified, that we create policies to address them. So this is a very serious undertaking, I think, by city staff to ensure that there is an office where there will be public consultation. It doesn't have to be ongoing and so extensive in the sense that we know what a lot of the challenges are. I mean, these issues have been studied for decades, but the reality is that we do have to get a contemporary feel for the challenges that are confronting many of our communities. And then we move forward with policy prescriptions. So we listen to where the gaps are, we identify the challenges, and then we create the policies to really address those issues, especially around employment equity, economic development, youth development, investments in social services. I think it's very important. We've heard very loud and clear, and as well around health outcomes for communities. So we heard that there were these 5 pillars that the community wanted addressed, and our feeling is that we will hold consultations. My office will, in September, hold another Black community town hall where there will be some discussion about these issues, identification of some of the gaps, and then ensuring that city staff start to move forward with suggestions for solutions.
How do you feel about the debate around defunding the police? I know that has become a bit of a loaded term in some discussions, but do we need to approach law enforcement differently? Do we need to stream some money away from the police budget toward mental health services, other social services to respond to some of the challenges that the police are now being asked to take on?
I think that we need to have a focus on ensuring that there is reform at the police service. I think the idea that the police service can easily be defunded or can be abolished is not a practical discussion to really have. I try to remind people that, I'm just a lowly city councillor. I haven't been elected to the House of Commons, so I cannot amend, abolish, repeal, or change the criminal code. And I'm not at the Legislative Assembly at Queen's Park. So I do not have a control over the Police Services Act, which governs our police service. But what we do have greater control over, almost carte blanche control over, is social service investments. And so I was very clear that we need to see really more orders of magnitude investment in those services. I've asked for $50 million of increased investments so that we can really address the root issues, of the challenges that we face in our communities. Because if we're dealing with them at the community level, then we will not be dealing with them at the criminal justice level. And so I think it's very important for us to be very realistic as to the work that we can undertake. But that does not preclude the fact that I am for reform. I am definitely for reform. I think that we need to spend more money and social services. I would rather see that money spent in social services than in additional police services. I think that that should be the goal across the board, is to ensure that we have more investments in our social services so that we don't have to rely on the criminal justice system. And so I'm for greater reform. I think that really defund the police in the Canadian context really does equate to reform, because we are different in Ontario, we are different in Canada. We do not have a direct control over the police service in terms of its operational spends. We have indirect control. And those controls are definitely backstopped by the province. If we don't fulfill certain responsibilities at council, then the province would take more direct control over those responsibilities. But I think what we need to do is really ensure that we are calling for greater prioritization over the police budget. So I'm for those reforms, but I'm for practical, realistic reforms within the structures that we operate in.
All right, let's turn to the coronavirus crisis and the response to it. Can you share some of the work that's being done in your ward to address in particular the people who are most affected by this? Your ward is has a very diverse population. There are some very wealthy neighborhoods. There are some disadvantaged neighborhoods as well in your community. So tell us a little bit about the work that's being done to support the people who are suffering the most during the coronavirus pandemic.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really impressed, and this is what I've told communities time and time again. I'm really impressed with the amount of collaboration that is being undertaken in our community. You know, I'm so proud that we have a wide number of community associations in my ward who have come together to ensure that vulnerable residents receive the food and the emergency services that they need through the creation of a collective. So the community associations actually formed a collective called OttawaCares.ca, and you can actually go to that website. And so they've combined their efforts to design and fill gaps in vulnerable neighborhoods, ultimately by ensuring that low-income residents have access to food, to household good deliveries, and even loneliness support for isolated seniors. These efforts, especially in Overbrook, which has its challenges, but a neighborhood that I'm proud to call home, ultimately have had its residents recognized for all the great work that they've been doing. So we've actually had two members of our community, Melanie Stafford and Danica Bryson, who have been acknowledged for their work by United Way as Community Builder Award recipients for that great work that they're doing, ensuring that lower income people and vulnerable people and seniors get access to all the services that they need. And that's at the grassroots level. And that's indicative of what goes on in our community. So I'm really pleased with that. I'm also pleased with the collaboration of the elected officials in the Ottawa-Vanier federal riding. We've actually been working together, so it's amazing. All of us, whether it's our MP Mona Fortier or MPP Lucille Collard, my colleagues Matthew Fleury for the Vanier area, and my colleague Tim Turney for Innis Serville for that area, Beacon Hill. We all come together, and we've been meeting on a weekly basis to really share the concerns of our residents. And I think that that's been very powerful, and to advocate for specific changes. So one of the things that we had been advocating for was for additional COVID-19 testing. And just recently it was announced that we would have more COVID-19 testing at the Ottawa Baseball Stadium location on Coventry Road. And we are continuing to push for more mobile testing throughout the East End and the near downtown core, especially for lower income people. We were successful in advocating with community groups for more mobile testing. So we actually had a pilot that was close to our ward on near Donald Street, that had 120 residents come and participate and get tested in our first mobile testing pilot. So we've been undertaking a lot of work with the community, and some of that culminated as well in advocacy work from my office to secure $40,000 for our community resource center that provides food bank services to our neighborhoods. So we've been working hard with city staff, with other elected officials, and with the community to ensure that there's been a robust response to the challenges around COVID-19.
So that's the immediate response. What do you think is going to be the lasting impact of this pandemic? What's going to change about the way we operate as a community permanently change, as opposed to the things that by and large will go back to normal? How do we need to adapt going forward?
Well, I think that we're going to have definitely challenges around the way that transit is delivered. One of the reasons why we had sustained a large deficit in revenue is because of a drop in terms of people riding the bus, riding the LRT. And we know that over the next extended period, there will be a lot of people who will be working from home if they have that capacity to do so. So that will definitely be a challenge, a potential revenue challenge for the city. And the other challenge that we are seeing will be around small business and ensuring that we provide the best supports that we can to really encourage and enable the sustainability of small business. There's been a lot of challenges in terms of survivability of the businesses, access to capital, ensuring that businesses are not evicted from their properties. So there's been a lot of advocacy work. And I've been proud to work with a local small business supporter, Michael Wood, and to hold small business roundtables for the ward to really have discussions on how do we ensure that we provide the tools to help businesses be viable. And so I've been trying to work with the Vanier BIA, our local business improvement area association, to ensure that we are really promoting tools. The first set of tools are online tools to ensure that small businesses have additional sources of revenue and different approaches to ensure their viability. So I think we'll definitely have a lot of challenges, as I said, around transit and around the sustainability of small businesses in Ottawa.
You mentioned transit. So how does this change the discussion about the future of public transit in our community? We're building a multi-billion-dollar light rail system. There have been issues, of course, in the first year of phase one, the Confederation line. What do you think about how our approach to transit is going to evolve as a result of more people working from home and some of those other changing dynamics?
I think it allows us to think about what we are delivering in terms of mass transit. I think that we need to have a more detailed discussion on what transit will look like in the future. Ideally, and as history has determined from the past, pandemics are temporary. So at a certain point, we will get back to the volume that we had before. But the question really will be, how do we deliver these services in the most effective manner? And I think that this public health crisis has been awful, but if there is a benefit, it has given us some time to actually really start to reflect on the system, and as well has provided some time ultimately for some of the issues to be addressed. So we know that we've had pauses in services so that the problems could start to be addressed. I think it's important for us to really start to have that deeper conversation on what mass transit will look like in the future. In my estimation, we need to be looking for more affordability and obviously ensuring that we have quality in terms of the investments that we have made. But I think it is important for us to start thinking about different changes and different tweaks that we can make to mass transit in this time.
The other consequence, of course, of what's happening with public transit is it's having a huge impact on the city's finances, with a lot fewer transit fares being paid by riders, by passengers. So what's your thought on how we approach the huge budget shortfall that the city is going to have? I know you're getting some money from federal and provincial government sources, but there will still be a gap. Will the city have to cut back on expenditures and services in some areas, or will you have to increase taxes beyond the 3% cap that the mayor promised in the last municipal election?
Well, at this point, my expectation, and when I'm talking with my colleagues at senior levels of government, we've been very clear that we did have a $192 million shortfall, and that's no fault of our own. The reality is that senior levels of government should ideally, in a federation like ours, act as a backstop, especially when you consider that municipalities in Ontario do not have the capacity to raise debt in order to pay for operations. So we have a stage one payment. There will be an additional payment. That's our understanding. The first payment that has been allocated to Ottawa should address 65% of the initial gap. The tools that staff have presented us have been in terms of a deferral plan. So we've been looking at capital deferrals in order to balance out some of the fiscal challenges that we have. But of course, our hope is that we would ultimately be made whole in the second payment, that the second payment would really address the 35% outstanding deficit that we have. And we make strong representations every time we're on those collaborative meetings with our colleagues to really emphasize the fact that the fiscal pressures that municipalities face are different than the challenges that a senior level would face, where they can not simply, but they can more easily issue debt. So our hope is really the next payment. However, city staff has come up with a plan that is primarily focused around capital deferrals so that we reach balance.
What are the other lessons that arise from this pandemic as far as you're concerned? How else do we need to change what we do? I know that a lot of issues have been brought forward, including the low pay associated with frontline jobs in grocery stores and in other frontline services. What are your thoughts on how we need to change as a society as a result of the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, I think that we have to really address income inequality. As a municipality, I would acknowledge that we do not have the full tools to do that. We definitely have to be dependent upon our senior levels of government, especially the federal government, to ensure that we are effectively addressing poverty. I say that because my area of the city has some of the higher poverty levels, and all the indicators, including food bank indicators, show that. Because of that, within the fall, I will be looking to introduce a proposal that would call for the creation of a poverty reduction strategy at the city. We really haven't had one in 10 years. And at the city, what we can really do is have better coordination with other levels of government and with communities and with inner city departments in order to really provide a better set of services in terms of addressing poverty reduction, especially around food security and issues around affordability and economic development. So it's going to be my goal, my mission within the fall to really provide a proposal to my colleagues, to the mayor, to council, in consultation with community, to really ask our Community and Protective Services Committee to to ask staff to re-implement a poverty reduction strategy for the city so that we can deal with the growing levels of income inequality. Because poverty will not just be really focused on the indigent poor, people who are in deep poverty. What we're going to see with COVID, unfortunately, and we've already begun to see this, is an increase in poverty across the board, or income inequality challenges across the board. And I think we have to be prepared for that. And that will mean better coordination with communities and across city departments.
What is the message that you want to leave with the residents of Rideau-Rockcliffe about the next phase as things start to change? Kids are back at school, some people are returning to work, those kinds of things are happening. The temperature's getting cooler, so more people are going to want to congregate indoors instead of on patios. We have about a minute left, but what's your message to your constituents about how to manage their way through that going forward?
Let's continue to be vigilant. I think it's very important for us to listen to our public health agency, to Ottawa Public Health. We've been doing that. And we've been listening as a council and taking their advice. And obviously, social distancing, wearing masks, maintaining proper hygiene is all very important. And we can't let up on that. But the key message I would want to leave is that I'm very optimistic and I'm very proud of our community. The way that we've responded and the way that we've collaborated really shows the depth and the strength of Rideau-Rockcliffe. And it makes me proud to be the elected representative for all my residents when I've seen all the hard work that has taken place, all the volunteers who have come together. And ultimately, it's a reflection of what really happens in our ward every day, where neighbors look out for neighbors. So I would say, let's stay vigilant and let's keep on looking after our neighbors. And we will really emerge stronger after this public health emergency dissipates.
All right, Rawlson King, thank you so much for joining us today. Good luck to you and your constituents in the months ahead.
Thank you.
Rawlson King, the City Councillor for Rideau-Rockcliffe Ward, Ward 13. That concludes our ward update. Thank you for watching.